Yeah, Sam's mostly known for his modern success, specifically with Melirapod, but he did get a standard Grand Prix top 8 very recently with Mono Blue Devotion, and he's here in Legacy with Bant Stoneblade, the deck that Reed Duke and then Sam Black at Grand Prix DC began popularizing recently.
And his opponent on the right, John Harduvel, is an Elves player from my neck of the woods. I believe he lives in Orange County, so I know him from Majestics, and he is playing Elves.
All right, well, Sam, lacking one of the one-drops that he really wants to start off with in the Bant list, just has a Windswept Heath to start. However, John, very likely to have a one-drop in his Elves deck, and indeed he does. Green Sun Zenith for Dryad Arbor, pretty standard opening play.
And I believe this matchup, game 1, is probably pretty rough for the Bant deck. The Elves deck is very streamlined and requires pretty specific resistance to have a good game 1 against. The Bant deck is more of a utility good stuff deck, and if John has any sort of good draw, I think he has a pretty substantial edge here, game 1.
Yeah, for sure. One of the biggest weapons that Sam has at his disposal is attempting to set up True Name Nemesis Jitte as a way to end the game, but that's pretty slow. The Elves deck can easily deploy a natural order or a big glimpse turn before that gets underway. So Sam will have to rely on Swords to Plowshares to kind of buy time. Doesn't seem like that's something he even has access to as he leads with Scavenging is here on turn 2. No answer to the Dryad Arbor.
So this Elf deck can actually go off as early as the second turn, uncontested. But no real pressure here. Sam with just a Scavenging Ooze, and so John has a little time to set up shop here and make his combo turn a little more reliable.
And we see John leads with the Verdant Catacombs here before playing the Visionary, likely a concession to Daze. He'd much rather hope to peel a Gaia's Cradle and get 2 mana out of the deal, but probably just really wants to get that Elvish Visionary onto the field, get the draw, start chaining together Elves, because he knows he just has to create a giant board, really.
As has been noted many times, Gaia's Cradle, the biggest beneficiary of the new Legend rule.
Yeah.
Not really new anymore, but the M13 rules change.
Well, John drops the Enemy of Daze is Everywhere now, Quirion Ranger, in conjunction with Dryad Arbor, capable of making a lot of mana, and Sam, fully aware of that fact, he decides to Force of Will Quirion Ranger.
And John set this up really nicely. He still has Wirewood Symbiote left over in his hand, which he can then start setting up with Elvish Visionary.
Land Knight of the Reliquary, Sam just on his mid-range game plan. It's not where you want to be against Elves. It's a deck that actually can play a very respectable creature game of its own, in addition to constantly threatening a combo finish.
So we'll see how much John is able to add to the board this turn. He may either try to go off or just simply draw a bunch of cards and set up his board further. He does have to be concerned with all times about Umezawa's Jitte connecting, but Wirewood Symbiote gives him a lot of tools to defend himself from that.
Yeah, with 2 Symbiotes in his hand, he can even play both, and it looks like, wow, yeah, Sam very aware of the danger of the Symbiote Elvish Visionary combination. Force of Wills again, but John has another one.
Yep. Sam with all 4 copies of Force of Will drawn this game. The Bant deck is a little light on blue cards, so Force of Wills aren't at their most reliable, but
certainly one of the best cards to remove Force of Will in the Bant deck is Force of Will itself, as its functionality decreases pretty rapidly in multiples. The ability to keep this hand on Sam's part clearly facilitated by the presence of a Force of Will in the opener. It's kind of a slow hand, but he could hope whatever he was playing against, one force would be able to stop the most dangerous of shenanigans, and then the creatures take care of themselves.
Yeah, Knight of the Reliquary plus Force of Will is a pretty good base.
Yep.
Covers you against a lot of the busted stuff that can happen as, Knight of the Reliquary can go get Caracas and so forth.
He did also have the advantage of the play. I don't think his hand is likely keepable on the draw, but on the play, you don't have to worry about your opponent just getting an unmolested turn 1. Probably a significantly stronger keep.
See the Ooze exile a couple creatures out of John's graveyard.
Yep, those Force victims now coming back to play Battle Growth on Sam's side. John's looking pretty well set up for a natural order in the very near future, however. His primary natural order is going to be Craterhoof Behemoth, as most Elves lists are doing these days. He is running 2 in the main deck, and he is not running the supplementary potential of, a Progenitus or a Regal Force, which some players debate the presence of in main decks or sideboards.
So Knight of the Reliquary, going to go spin up a Wasteland there and take care of the Dryad Arbor.
Sam's hoping that that'll slow John down, but his hopes may be in vain. Nettle Sentinel added to the cause.
I believe this is a reasonable spot to stick natural order. Depends how fancy John wants to get here, trying to draw some cards and having a little extra resistance. But this seems like a reasonable spot to go and get Greater Hoof Behemoth.
Mm-hmm. The Greater Hoof Behemoth in and of itself will be capable of attacking for 9 damage. Any 2 creatures alongside it. John untapping and replaying with the combination of Heritage Root, Elvish Visionary, and then getting the Nettle Sentinel untapped as well. You see that basically completely resets his position and allows him to draw a card. He's rewarded with an excellent card, Green Sun Zenith.
So he still has, now he has 4 mana. He had 1 mana floating at the end of all that.
He makes 3 more, and it looks like he's zenithing for 1 or 2 mana. Difficult to tell exactly what he designated that for, so he has still enough mana left over to Crater Hoof either way. Looks like he goes for 1 to get a Symbiote, Wash, Rinse, Repeat. And we see this is the Elf deck generating that critical mass where it just makes the hoof better and better as it goes.
Yes.
Sam pretty much at John's mercy from this point.
Your pairings are up. If you have not already found your seats, please do so. Again, 2 of the giant players, your pairings are up.
And now he's found Glimpse, which gives him an incredible setup for next turn potentially.
Yeah, if there's going to be a next turn.
Yeah.
Now, as far as non-summoning sit creatures available, we have the Heritage Druid and one of the Wirewood Symbiotes. We've bounced that Visionary, so it's no good. And the Nettle Sentinel is also fresh this turn, I believe, right?
Correct.
So yeah, we've got exactly 2 creatures that can go in alongside Crater Hoof Behemoth, but we would have to tap them to cast it. So John decides, I'm not interested in that, I'll just get him next turn. All 4 forces are gone, what's to be scared of?
Right. He has insurance against Mazao's Jete with his symbiotes. Doesn't have to play around Force of Will, so and no risk of him getting burned out or anything, so he can just.
Yeah, next turn the natural order will kill through virtually anything that Sam could reasonably present. And John knows that, so holds his ground.
So that Knight of the Reliquary is 2, 3, 4, 5 right now.
Yep. John could just take this attack and go to 6, is clearly considering doing so, but the symbiotes are tempting, you know, you just bounce back 1 elf, what's the harm? And it appears that that's what John may in fact be doing. He knows he doesn't need all of these creatures on the next turn to Crater Hoof his opponent to death.
And so it looks like the Ooze is getting it uncontested.
John falls to 11, Sam will need a pretty strong follow-up. Just Noble Hierarch. That's about as close to a white flag as you're going to see in this game.
So even on just on board with a land drop here, Crater Hoof is well over lethal, correct?
We'll see if John decides to go for the bells and whistles and get a few Wirewood symbiote activations in before he goes off, but he's likely just mulling over what could my opponent possibly have that would shut this down. He decides Glimpse. That's about as many bells and whistles as I can imagine going for at this stage. And Glimpse draws for the Heritage Druid. He bounced. He has another Heritage Druid that he can go ahead and cast. And a Quirion Ranger off the top. Even more mana production now. I have a feeling he may just be good to call it quits now and go ahead and natural order one of these fresh creatures, tapping all of the fresh creatures to cast it.
John just trying to make sure here. No harm in taking a little time to make sure.
Yeah. Oh, man. No, he's going for gusto.
Yeah.
All right, well, we can't blame a man. You know, you give him a stage, he's going to perform. Right? Like.
That's a draw 3.
Yeah. Making sure to stack his triggers. One of the trickiest aspects of playing elves, especially at a competitive level, is I should say, the many triggers that the deck generates. It's very easy to mix them up, to forget one, to trigger an extra one. All of these things are things you definitely want to avoid. John, I kind of have a sense based on the all-foil nature of his deck, is likely a practiced elves pilot.
No, John, all John's decks are like this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, John takes great pride in his Magic decks. Then I would say. I'm especially admiring the attention to miscut foil forest.
Yes.
Likely the first fetch land target whenever he wants a basic land. I know I would. Continues to chain elves together, drawing card after card.
He's now found a Cradle as his land drop for the turn.
And Gaia's Cradle will pretty much, I mean, he was already doing basically whatever he wanted. Gaia's Cradle, almost enough to merit a concession in and of itself at this stage. But Sam is going to make him show it. Cradle is also one of the biggest reasons this deck can actually win by casting Craterhoof Behemoth. Previously a problem for natural order decks. They would draw their natural order targets, have to go through the trouble of brainstorming them back into the deck or discarding them. But Elves just plays Craterhoof Behemoth.
Yep.
8 mana, no
big
sweat.
deal.
He could cast 2 right now. And there's the natural order. Untaps his Nettle Sentinels. Picks up the deck, rifles through it. That Craterhoof Behemoth is going to be more than enough. And Sam picks him up.
So John with a little bit of flair there.
Yeah,
Might
yeah.
have been able to go off a little bit more easily than that, but might as well take your time to shine, you know,
Sure, sure.
as we move on to the sideboard of games.
Moving to the sideboards. John does have access to the sideboard Progenitus. He's not running any other creatures that he would be natural ordering for in general. The rest of his sideboard is Pithing Needle, a Scavenging Ooze, 3 Abrupt Decay, 2 Mindbreak Trap, 3 Cabal Therapy, a Natural Order, the 4th one, and a 3 Thoughtseize. So he's got a lot of hate for some of these combo decks between the Cabal Therapies and Thoughtseizes. I imagine he may bring in an Abrupt Decay or 2, or perhaps a Pithing Needle, but really I think that these mid-range matchups are the kind of decks that Elves wants to face in general, so I would not expect him to sideboard heavily.
Yeah, there's not even really any specifically problematic creature or permanent for him to be fighting over.
He already has a Viridian Shaman in the main deck that lets him take care of the Jitte, and most decks only have access to 1, and even then he has options to keep it from getting online. So the cards that are blanks and never help his combo, I'm not too excited about seeing those come in, and he's probably going to keep things mostly as is.
So for Samuel Pardee, he has a additional copy of Umazawa's Jitte, which has kind of been public enemy #1 for Elves for a very long time. He has a copy of Either Sworn Canonist that he can bring in to break up some of John's turns, even the turns where he's not going off. If you're watching that game, John's frequently casting 3, 4, 5 spells a turn to try to set up.
It's basically a value bear, which is nothing to be ashamed of.
Right. And he also has 2 copies of Humility. I'm sure this is more for Stake and Show matchups, but it has a lot of utility here, of course, as John's deck is really predicated on the powers and text boxes of his creatures.
Yeah, the humilities are very huge, and I know that many Elves players are actually not that scared of humility because the deck can generate such a critical mass that if a humility fight develops, they feel like a favorite. You know, Glimpse, obviously a big facilitator in that particular endeavor. However, Bant Stoneblade can pair humility with Umazawa's Jitte,
Yes.
and that gives them the edge. Equipment and humility is a great combination in creature mirrors. I imagine we'll also see Sam bringing in the Singleton Gaddock Teague, probably. It might shut off his forces or his own Zeniths in an inopportune way, but being able to lock out both Green Sun Zenith and Natural Order from the opponent might be worth that exchange.
Yeah, I really question the value of Force of Will in this matchup. I know that John's playing a combo deck, but the Elves deck can actually win au natural just by generating a critical mass of creatures and attacking. So it's not like old permutations of Elves decks where you could simply counter the Glimpse and then the deck wasn't really doing anything else powerful. This deck's gotten substantially better over the last couple of years and more redundant too with Natural Order. So it's much harder to fight over this deck with just a couple copies of Force of Will.
Now, even in that game, you can see that kind of element manifest itself. If John had set his mind to it, it would not have been so difficult to race a Knight and Scavenging Ooze with his board. He can attack with all his creatures. He's got Symbiote to give them pseudo-vigilance, and he gets to block without losing some of them. Would not have been an insane situation to see that deteriorate into a race. He just happened to have the combo finish available to him.
Right.
So yeah, that's one of the best parts about Elves decks, and I know I've talked to some Elves pilots who see the deck more as specifically a beatdown deck that happens to be able to win with this combo finish, which makes beatdown games all the more easier to get that proper advantage in when your opponent's busy defending themselves from a combo you may or may not have. That gives you the window to club them to death with tiny green men.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel like the Elves decks, the combination of additions of new cards and just the list getting more refined over time has made this deck much more powerful than it used to be. I remember playing Burn where I would play a first turn Grim Lavamancer and feel like I couldn't possibly lose. That's not the case anymore.
Yep. The deck has definitely gotten better, and the printing of Craterhoof Behemoth and the change to the Legendary Rule for Gaia's Cradle are two major recent reasons why. As far as changes to the Legacy format go, those are pretty big ones.
Yes. I rarely feel like there's an archetype has gotten improved over the years dramatically simply by the list getting more refined, but Elves is definitely an exception.
We see Sam once again without a turn 1, but John has one in Deathrite Shaman. Deathrite Shaman's pretty handy against the Knight of the Reliquary Bant Stoneblade deck. Fortunately, it's not as dependent on Knight as it has been in past years. There are only 2 copies to make room for 4 True Name Nemesis, new kid on the block, and excellent equipment wielder. I have a feeling we'll see Sam fetching up Umezawa Jitte with this Stoneforge Mystic. Marquee equipment in the matchup, pretty handy.
Yep.
And there it is. Natural order off the top for John. Looks like he has a hand packed with a couple Elvish Visionaries, a Wirewood Symbiote. I believe he has a Craterhoof Behemoth in there as well. So he's got a bit of a slow starter, but it's capable of grinding the advantage you need against these Stoneforge decks.
So you see a Symbiote and a Visionary here.
You see he leads the Symbiote first, protecting it from the potentials of Daze, and then the Elvish Visionary second. He has a spare Elvish Visionary, does not have a spare Wirewood Symbiote, and he knows it's public enemy #1.
Yeah, I mean, mission now for John, if he can't win the game quickly, is to prevent Umezawa Jitte from getting equipped to anything.
And Sam's mission will be to make sure that Umezawa Jitte connects, which will involve killing that Wirewood Symbiote or planting it on True Name Nemesis. Those are really his only 2 ways to get it in.
And, you know, Sam, I believe, has True Name Nemesis in hand. And a lot of people, if you haven't watched a lot of Legacy or watched a lot of Elves, would suspect that, yeah, you just play True Name Nemesis here and set up Jit next turn. But this Elf deck can win from very little on board.
Yeah, this is certainly enough of a board position to threaten a potential kill, and Sam knows that, so he's got to evaluate the likelihood of him dying next turn if he taps out. And it looks like he decides, I can get that True Name down later. I want to take care of that Wirewood Symbiote. I have to kill it anyway.
So I believe we're doing this inside of John's upkeep.
Yep, that way he denies John getting an extra quote-unquote activation with the Wirewood Symbiote on the Elvish Visionary. And also, you know, gave John the opportunity to perhaps misuse it during the end step, bounce an Elvish Visionary that might not be ideal.
Leaving 2 mana available to Stoneforge in his Jitte in a turn.
He also does have a spare Jitte in his hand from the looks of it, which he might be able to take John by surprise with at an opportune moment. Looks like John's Visionary found him another Wirewood Symbiote. He also has a 3rd Visionary and a pair of Natural Orders.
And no land, so...
Yeah. Sam wisely holding that fetch land uncracked until John's end step prevents John from using the Deathrite Shaman to cast any of his many 1-drop spells.
I assume we're going to see an end of turn Stoneforged in Jitte.
Yeah, anything else would be a little surprising. With no Wirewood Symbiote on the field, Sam can actually just put that Jitte on the Mystic and start trying to go to town. And he draws a Swords. That makes that play incredibly attractive. He'll have the Swords up to ensure against any shenanigans on John's turn. And yeah, he's going in. John's in trouble.
Yes. And
Looks like he blocked with, I'm assuming, Deathrite Shaman and Elvish Visionary in order to kill. I guess it could have been any 2 creatures, really. Yeah. In order to kill the Stoneforge Mystic, which is correct. You want to make sure you get the creature off the board so you're not assaulted by the Jitte on the next turn as well.
so, yeah, this is devastating for John. His entire board's collapsing, and Sam's still with True Name Nemesis as backup here.
Yeah, Wasteland takes out that Bayou. John down from a pretty reasonable situation to now just a single forest in play alongside Elvish Visionary. And it looks like he drew Progenitus, which he has boarded in. Makes sense. It is a way to win against an Umezawa Jitte. It can both race it and, once it's in play, is immune to it. And yeah, John working to reestablish.
Sam wisely taking care of that symbiote.
Yeah, goes ahead and uses it while he has the chance. Plays Nemesis, and John knows what that means. That means he needs to get something going real fast, or his board is going to disappear turn after turn.
Abrupt decay of the draw for John.
I think Gaia's Cradle was what we really wanted to see this turn in order to perhaps let us get something going fast enough. As is, it doesn't look likely that he'll be able to claw his way out. He can make some mana, put some guys on the field, but he'll be losing most of them quickly, and he'll be under pressure the whole time.
So the combo of the day was Jite on True Name Nemesis.
It's a killer one from what I hear.
They pair well together.
Considering how long the card's out, it only has one GP win to its name, but it didn't take long.
You can come up to the stage to check to see if we have yours.
John trying to see if there's a way out. Starts the race. Nothing else to do with these Visionaries but attack. They're certainly not blocking. Nettle Sentinel requires a little more attention from the Jite than most of the creatures in John's deck, so he goes ahead and deploys it now.
What is kind of noteworthy here is Sam still has to be conscious of the fact that John can, with a Cradle, cast Natural Order. So he needs to make sure that, John never gets that many creatures in play where he has enough mana to just Natural Order straight away.
Yeah, if he draws a Cradle, he can go ahead and Natural Order. Also, if Sam decides to kill the Nettle Sentinel with Jite counters and leave the Visionaries alive, a Heritage Druid would also have been able to threaten it with another land off the top, which no doubt John was kind of hoping to at some point set up, but now that the Jite has 4 counters, that's pretty much, that ship has sailed. We see Viridian Shaman off the top, John just drawing pretty much all of his singletons at this point, but with his single forest is really not able to do much of anything. And Sam immediately responds to the casting of Heritage Druid to kill those 2 Visionaries. Leaves the Sentinel alone, knows he'll get another warning as to whether there's another elf coming before he has to burn 2 counters on it.
So John trying to do his best to slog through this Mazaz Jite with 1 land in play and his all 1/1 deck. But
yeah, it's not going to happen. I think we've passed the point of no return. He'll have to peel, like, running forest to just Viridian Shaman that Jite, and we know Sam has another Jite already in hand, just ready to go. Sam appearing to debate using a Swords to Plowshares right now, decides not to. Well, he's also sandbagging a Wasteland. Doesn't want to let Johnny know he has access to that.
And
in for 2, Sam goes to 11.
Trucking on in.
John's grinding it out, but as long as his creatures don't merit any killing, the Jite's ability to charge counters for life is going to ensure that Sam doesn't actually have to be worried about this race. He can take damage from a Nettle Sentinel all day. He's effectively gaining 4 life a turn or killing 1 to 2 creatures.
He wants to use his plow here instead of his Jite because I believe he just wants to threaten lethal next turn.
Yep. Using 2 counters would have forced him into a non-lethal attack on the following turn, so he declines. Zenith for 1, or for 0, I should say, digging up Dryad Arbor, the usual, but that will not be enough. Sam draws a Noble Hierarch, checks to see if he needs to play it before he attacks. He does not. And that sends them on to game 3. We saw things pretty much just go according to Sam's plan in the matchup that game.
Yeah.
He was able to keep Wirewood Symbiote from controlling his ability to get Umezawa's Jite online. John ended up a little Mana Light on a crucial turn, and Sam took advantage of that choke point and just got going.
Yeah, and the critical thing now with Sam on the draw is even a curve of, say, Umezawa's Jite into True Name Nemesis is not going to be fast enough against a lot of John's quality hands.
Yep.
It's going to be a lot more necessary for him to have either Noble Hierarch or Green Sun Zenith for Dryad Arbor in this game than it was in the previous game.
Yeah, I would go so far as to say Sam is mulliganing most 7s that don't contain Noble Hierarch, Swords to Plowshares, Green Sun Zenith, or perhaps Daze, although I don't think that Daze is very good when you're on the draw in this matchup, and I would imagine he's likely siding it out since it's pretty mediocre against Elves in general.
Yeah, he really needs to have an accelerant.
Yeah,
is the short version.
He basically, Sam wants to have some form of interaction or board progression on turn 1 available to him when he's on the draw in this matchup. So we'll see if he is able to find a 7-card hand that offers that. Once you have to start mulliganing and looking at 6s and 5s, you have to be a little more lenient. You can't operate under such strict rules.
Right.
Sometimes you just got to hope that turn 2 Stoneforge Mystic's going to be enough. But we shall see.
And it looked like John brought in a reasonable amount of removal. He at least brought in the Abrupt Decays.
Yeah, he definitely brought in at least some Abrupt Decays. I'm wary of bringing in a lot because they really dilute your deck. You only want to draw 1 per game, probably. It's unlikely. I shouldn't say unlikely. It's atypical, maybe, that your opponent's going to have 2 Jittes. And Abrupt Decay, you really don't want to point it at any of the creatures. Mostly they're irrelevant.
Yeah.
But every now and then you might need to burn one. So you don't mind drawing 1 Abrupt Decay. If you have to burn on a creature, that's fine. Drawing 2 could be actively disastrous. Plus, it makes your glimpses a little weaker when you have more spells in your deck.
Yeah, no, there's a big opportunity cost, definitely, to putting in spells and removing creatures. You want the deck to be as threat dense as consistent as possible, and adding spells, especially spells you can't even cast all the time, because you don't always have access to black mana, is a real cost that John's paying.
Yeah, I think you just want to keep the deck mostly as streamlined as possible, and maybe board in some very specific choices. I saw Sam. I think he has like a Wasteland and a Force of Will, and we see him immediately mulligan. Likely that hand did not meet the criteria we were just discussing.
Yeah, and we were both saying Sam probably needs to mulligan very aggressively on the draw here. I mean, there's a bunch of decent hands that he probably just can't keep.
Yeah, and ironically, those are the kind of hands that this deck is prone to making active keeps in game 1s. I feel like this deck, the Bant deck actively looks for pretty fair Magic in general. It's just looking for like a reasonable curve, some forms of interaction, and one of the things that appeals to me about the deck is it has a high percentage number of keeps in game 1 situations, where it's just looking at a decent hand that's never really a gigantic favorite, but always something.
Yeah, I feel like this is trying to just be the best True Name Nemesis deck possible between Noble Hierarch and Stoneforge Mystic. It's really trying to maximize that card's power.
Sam does keep his 6, and John starts off with a fetch land and some kind of 1-drop, as expected. Yep, that Miscut Forest. I had that read. And Green Sun Zenith for Dryad Arbor.
Yeah, I was watching him play an Esper Stoneblade deck in a local tournament that was at least as attractive as this Elf deck.
At least. Impressive. And I know that the Elves players listening might take a little offense, but I don't get that impressed by the foil Elves decks,
It's a lot of comments.
Yeah, it's a bunch of Elves. Those things are easy to find. I got bunches of them. But I'll take, those Visions, Misprint, Natural Orders. Those are a little trickier.
Sure. The miscut.
Foil Cradle. Foil Cradle earns my respect.
I believe it's currently in John's hand.
Yeah.
Or at least it was in his deck while he
It
was
was definitely
shuffling.
in his deck, yeah. Sam does have a turn 1 Green Sun Zenith for Dryad Arbor. He gets, looks like Savannah to go and fetch it, which means he can't threaten a turn 3 True Name, or a turn 2 True Name Nemesis.
See another Zenith from John here.
This one's for 1. It goes and gets Quirion Ranger. Yes. That's a pretty big amount of mana production going on. You can untap the Dryad Arbor, bounce the forest you just used, replay it, basically free roll the Green Sun Zenith. And he gets the Quirion Ranger in play as well.
Forest comes back. Arbor untapped.
Elvish Visionary draws a card. With what he has in play, he can already threaten a Natural Order on the next turn. Likely that Natural Order will get probably just the hoof. If he gets to actually cast it, he'll use the Dryad Arbor, he taps, and use the rest of the mana to cast the Natural Order and attack for bunches. Sam has that playoff with Swords of Plowshares.
Yes.
We see now why he fetched up that Savannah as opposed to a tropical island. Much more important to have access to that Swords of Plowshares than it was to potentially have True Name Nemesis on turn 2.
A very threatening Razaz Jitte in play for Sam now, which he can put on his Arbor. Sam also appears to have boarded in at least one of his 2 Vendilion clicks.
I like that. Can kind of check for those natural orders if you get it down early enough. Plus, it's a flyer, which means you don't have to kill a Wirewood Symbiote to start chugging away with the Jitte. I know that when I've played against Elves in the past, that has been relevant. True Name Nemesis kind of relieves that pressure, but still a role the card can play. John with a Deathrite Shaman, and it looks like an attack for 1.
You can see he has Glimpse in hand as well.
Yeah, it did have a Glimpse, but declined to play it for minor value this turn. And passes turn with 2 mana up. Interesting. I think that means it's likely he has an Abrupt Decay if that's his line, as opposed to glimpsing and playing 2 creatures this turn. I know I saw a Heritage Druid in there as well. So it seems very likely that he has access to Abrupt Decay.
So he's going to go and find a Bayou here at the end of the turn.
And he also does, because of that Deathrite Shaman, have the mana necessary to threaten Natural Order.
I think there actually is an argument there for going after Knight of the Reliquary with Sam missing his land drop that turn.
Yeah, it's possible that John is already on a different line. Perhaps he thinks he's just going to be able to grind this with glimpses. And yeah, it looks like he starts off with glimpse and has access to Heritage Druid as well. Sam forces exiling the True Name Nemesis that he's a long way from casting. That leaves him with just Vendilion Click in his hand.
A second glimpse. And now Sam with his head in his hands, hoping that nothing too horrible happens this turn.
To be fair, it doesn't look like it's going to be too bad.
Yeah, John's already
he's
ball
done. Next turn, however, things might get really hairy.
Sam draws as a tropical island.
It's not nothing. That'll let him cast Vendilion Click in conjunction with his Knight of the Reliquary.
Yep.
And that'll let him strip Natural Order before it kills him, which is probably the best possible time to strip Natural Order.
Before it gets cast.
If I could choose it, yeah. In its bed while it sleeps, as they say.
Unfortunately, for Sam, the other card in John's hand is Glimpse. So giving John a draw step and then an additional draw of the click might mean that Glimpse plus those 2 cards could just kill him.
Yeah, he's definitely kind of locked in between a rock and a hard place on those 2 cards. They're the best 2 cards John could have probably in his hand at this time, outside of just 2 natural orders.
Yeah.
A Green Sun Zenith would also be not far off, as it could find a Wirewood Symbiote. Wirewood Symbiote, obviously, a strong card here as well. One of the great things about the Elves deck is how consistent it is. As we mentioned, how refined it's become over the years means you get to these situations where there are so many things that are bad for you.
Yep, very redundant. And again, also capable of winning kind of a natural game. Even with Vendilion Click this turn, even if John can't go off, actually start attacking with his creatures and using Deathrite Shaman to start dealing damage as well.
Yep. I'll be interested to see if Sam feels obligated to wasteland that Bayou and kind of limit that Deathrite Shaman, plus the ability of John to draw Abrupt Decay is also concerning. He'll no doubt at least wait until after he casts Vendilion Click to make that decision.
Yep. Shows over his hand in Natural Order, Glimpse, and Misty Rainforest.
Yep. Well, Misty Rainforest is not a creature, so that makes Sam likely breathe a little easier over the presence of Glimpse of Nature in John's hand. If the Vendilion Click does cycle into a creature or a Zenith, it'll be bad news, though. And it appears Sam is declining to wasteland the Bayou during the upkeep.
Is that another Glimpse?
That is another Glimpse. One of the better things that Sam could see John draw here. It basically buys him likely a turn of pseudo-stalemate. I don't see John willing to risk all of these creatures. He definitely wants to keep as many elves as he can for his Druid, and the Visionary is crucial to make his Zenith for Symbiote or a drawn Symbiote much more powerful. A respectable amount of tanking just to make sure Sam doesn't know that these cards don't do anything. And passes the turn. So Sam went from looking very likely to be dead to like he might have a shot here. And yeah, Noble Hierarch gives him a little bit more of a clock. 4 damage comes in, and John's going to have to put something together soonish.
Yeah, but all it could take here is really 1 creature, and that could be enough.
Yeah.
Really start the fireworks.
easily just start a chain reaction that sees Sam fall apart.
John getting it forward to the end of the turn. I imagine we'll be seeing a Death Right activation. Oh, just gonna
No.
draw.
During the draw step, Sam goes for a Bayou with Wasteland, it looks like. And sacks a Savannah. Fetching up likely another Wasteland to terminate the Dryad Arbor. That appears to be what he has declared already.
Trying to grow that Knight and more importantly cut John off of mana, as that will likely be the bottleneck in the event that he's actually able to glimpse. Now, John actually has drawn a Cradle this turn, so one creature gives him an enormous opportunity to get the ball rolling.
Yep, I still like Sam's decision to go ahead and Wasteland aggressively. Wastelanding a Cradle after it enters play is a real losing bet. It's already given him so much mana at that point that it basically turned into a gigantic ritual, which is totally fine. And now Sam turns up the heat, sends the Knight into combat as well, and that Knight is large. It looks like it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7/7?
Yep. Still not lethal though. It may not warrant.
8/8, I believe. 8/8.
If it's not a lethal attack from John, it still probably doesn't warrant a response here.
Yeah, nothing more than gaining 2 life, which that appears to be what John's going to go for. He does want to stay out of range of an attack from the Vendilion Clique, which he has to keep in mind what can be assisted by Exalted. There's already the Noble Hierarch in play, and a second one off the top could change the math a little bit as well.
Again, source of plowshares for Sam, just trying to bottleneck John on mana.
Yep.
All right.
Got a plan. Up, Elvish Visionary, one of the more expensive elves John could draw here, but any elf in a storm is going to probably go ahead and cast a Glimpse. I'm not sure if he can afford to cast 2. I don't think so. And then probably play Glimpse, or play Elvish Visionary.
I think he has to start by going Glimpse, play Visionary, then play Cradle, and hope to be able to go from there.
He'll get 2 draw steps off the Visionary, and hopefully Cradle plus 2 draw steps is just going to be enough to mount a defense. Appears to be the line he is pursuing. Make sure to exile from Sam's graveyard, shrinks that Knight. Draws a green Sun Zenith. Not exactly what he wanted to see. And another Cradle. It's going to leave him stymied. He can Zenith for a Symbiote, I guess. And he can pretty much untap the Deathward Shaman and gain 2 life at that point. That's about it.
Also worth noting that he can simply not die from the attacks by jump blocking and try to do this all again next turn.
Yeah, because he drew a second Cradle, he also can dodge Sam's ability to go fetch up another Wasteland, lose that Cradle. So, yeah, he definitely isn't dead, and he gets another shot.
Yeah.
He's using the extra mana just to recast the Elvish Visionary and draw an additional card, so feeling safe on 6 life, which is fair. He can't die to a Noble Hierarch off the top or a Green Sun Zenith off the top from Sam. So, yeah, I like that better than gaining any life. Seems like a better use of the mana. He does still have the Symbiote available to let him cycle as an Elvish Visionary on defense.
Sam untaps and draws.
Looks at the card very briefly and then immediately goes to his attack step. Probably a bad sign for Sam.
It looks like his draw step was Force of Will.
Yeah, not a fantastic one.
I mean, probably not actually. I guess he's going and getting another Wasteland here.
Yeah, he can't let John untap with the Cradle, and he knows that, but John already has another one, so this is actually in vain. Another Green Sun Zenith? All right, now John is seriously in business. Plays the Cradle, has a ton of mana.
So he has 1, 2, 3, 4.
He can make 6 right now. He's shy of actually just, Zenithing for Craterhoof and getting it.
He has drawn a natural order, though.
Yep. And I think that is going to be good enough, assuming he decides to fear nothing that Sam could have. And I can't think of anything Sam could have. He does have Noble Hierarch, so he can threaten any any number of spells, but most of them aren't realistic considerations. So he's likely considering exactly how he should sequence his spells this turn to make sure everything gets as big as possible to dodge any response.
So we see a natural order here.
Okay, he's going for it. Gets the hoof, declares the trigger. Does Sam have anything?
So it's plus 12 on board, 13, 14. Yep, and that's game.
All right, tough fought.